Hello, so this is a response to a request. Somebody wanted me to do a video about the flat 3 diminished 7th chord. Okay, and I kind of touched on this chord progression, or the stroke chord, a little bit in my Djangology soloing options video, which is one of the first videos I posted on this channel. But I thought it would be a good time to sort of revisit this chord in isolation, because it's actually a really important one. Now, sorry, I keep knocking this pen around. Stop that. So the most common context for this is when you have this kind of a turnaround, which Gypsy Jazz guys might recognise from the tune Django's Tiger, amongst other ones. And if we wrote these chord symbols down, it would be G/B, which is this one, which is like first inversion G major chord. The next chord will be a B flat diminished, which is our flat 3 diminished 7th chord, and then the next one is A minor, and then we go to D7, right? So it's kind of a turnaround. However, the turnaround that most people are more familiar with, I guess, I'm just trying to find a slightly better pick. This one will do. Yeah, slightly better for this kind of music. You know, most people are used to the one where you play either G major, E7, A minor, D7, which is another type of turnaround, 1 6 2 5, or you get the variation with 3 6 2 5. And these progressions are better known in, I think, modern jazz education, whereas I think the flat 3 diminished, this thing, which with the, we're in the key of G and it's the B flat diminished 7th instead of an E7 chord, basically, is perhaps less well covered, because these progressions, I think, started to go out of fashion a little bit around the time that you know, modern jazz started really becoming established. They were thought of as more old-fashioned sounds. Now, of course, if we want to play more old-fashioned music, then this progression becomes quite important. Let me just try this pick. I'm going to be picky about picks today. So yeah, because of that, I think that it's quite poorly served in the literature of jazz education and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to whiz through some quick options of things that you can do, and try and keep it in under a 10-minute video. We'll see how we do. So there are various sort of substitutions which get used in modern jazz to change this chord into something hipper, but obviously we won't cover these in this video because it will be outside the scope of what we're doing. You know, this particular progression comes in very often with an associated melody, and the melody often, if we're in the key of G, it would be a G on top, and then it'd be going F sharp E against the B flat diminished 7th, and then you get the 2 5 going into G, right? So it's very, very common. So one tune that I like to play a lot is I can't give you anything but love, baby, which is a very common swing era sort of standard. And the melody just goes 1 7 6 1 7 6 1 6, and then it continues. But against the ya ba 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 ya bum ba bum ba. Now if we did that ya ba bum ba ba bum ba bum ba, that would work. I'm using an E minor 7th there, but it wouldn't have quite the same rich, old school kind of voice leading that we hear. And this is one of the reasons why the progression is so nice, I think. Yeah, I mean, it crops up in loads of songs. I won't talk too much about which songs it does, but I mean, I'll give you a list in a second, actually. But I just wanted to point out the voice leading, which is how it works. So, for example, if we got the, let's say we have the 6 in the melody, and this key will be E, then we have this major chord against it, and in that major chord, you have a 10th, which is from between the B and the D, right? And it's a minor 10th. We could also play it as a minor 3rd, but we're going to do it as a minor 10th. And this shape, and that's what you get, right? It's a minor 10th moving down. If I used a 3rd, it might be a little bit easier to see, perhaps. So in that case, we'd be taking the, you know, the B up a octave, so it'd be here. And if I I put a sixth in underneath it. And hopefully you can see a little bit more how this progression works. It's unlike, say for example, our 1-6-2-5, where we've got thirds and sevenths resolving like that. We're actually using a different type of voice leading. So instead of just using maybe one chromatic line, we're using two together with that minor third. So, with that said, I'll just give you a quick list of tunes that you can find this kind of progression in. Django's Tiger has this turnaround, as do many of the Django repertoire tunes, such as Hungaria, and I often play it in the Shake of Arrghhh in a key of B flat. Here it comes. So we hear that old school kind of sound. So it crops up a lot in those sorts of tunes. It's in Djangology, of course. China Boy has an interesting example because the China Boy example lasts for a whole 2 bars. So, for example, in the last 8, China Boy goes ya ba ba ya ba 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 ba. Different versions of that progression might have it going back to wherefore, it might have it going to a 2-5. So on the whole, this chord progression back in the key of G usually goes 3 or 1 with a 3 in the bass, flat 3 diminished, 2, 5. You do get variations that go the other way, so you can go 2, flat 3 and then 1. So it works either way. And there's a beautiful Barry Harris thing which explains why this voice leading works. But suffice to say, there's only really 2 notes different between, for example, a G major 6th chord and a C major 6th chord, right? And the diminished chord creates a little bit of chromatic movement between them. So it just links those 2 chords together. That's the Barry Harris explanation. And Barry Harris is obsessed with these chords, by the way, and complains that nobody plays them anymore. So, but I think what most people are interested in with this is not necessarily the voice leading implications, but really what you can play through them. And I'm going to take the example of I Can't Give You Anything But Love in the key of G major. And this is has a 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Actually, in the Django version, there's a little bit of chromatic dress up he plays with the D7. But we can effectively ignore that. We'll just play G/B, B flat diminished 7th, A minor 7, D7. Okay? So the A minor 7, D7, we're going to lump together as a D7 sort of thing. We're not going to worry about the A minor particularly. So what we end up with is this. But we still have our B flat diminished 7th that lasts for a whole bar. So what are we going to do with that? Well, we're just going to ignore it. This is the simplest way to play it. Okay? So. So that gives you an idea, hopefully. It works, you know, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so say we want to, so we have the option of just doing that, just basically treating it as a linking passing chord without any particular harmonic implications. It's not a big deal, right? One way of looking at it. Okay, so the next way of looking at it would be, I think, quite simply to learn how to bring it out as a sound of an arpeggio. And of course, if you do that, then you just need to play the arpeggios, right? So, I mean, the way I like to do things is a lot of triads. So we start with a G major triad. Sorry, I did a little. So what I'm playing there is a G major triad, B flat diminished 7th. All Gypsy Jazz guitarists should be familiar with that shape. If you're not, I mean, there's another shape which is like this, the diagonal shape. But you should really know your diminished 7th arpeggios inside out because it's such an intrinsic part of the style, and also for swing as well, for swing music in general, and for jazz in general, bebop, whatever. Okay, and for the A minor. D7. I'm just using an A minor 6. Because that's quite a fruity sound. So the whole thing is, you know, you just practice running. So, whatever. But if you notice, you have that sound going up and down, right? Well, just going down in this case, but I mean, that's something I touched on in the Jangology video. It's just like, I'm using another diminished there on, you know, as a D7 flat 9 substitute. So that is a really important thing. It's like, it's not just enough just to run the arpeggios, you know, whatever, and then, you know, I mean, that's nice, but it's really important to actually see how they all link up. So, you know, then maybe do some chromatic little movements into different chords. So that's the second way. Now, moving on, I think a lot of people are interested in this thing called the whole half scale, which is the diminished scale, and it's a collection of whole steps and half steps. You hear about it a lot in jazz education. I just wanted to quickly touch on it and show you what the kind of swing, stroke gypsy jazz, stroke bebop roots of that scale are. And that's basically, if I take, now we all know about this Django thing where you go, you take the half step below each chord tone. You know, and you practice it. Now if we do the same thing for diminished seventh, so diminished seventh here, what we get is this, which is the diminished scale, right? But we're starting a half step below the chord tone on the upbeat. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. And that way you've always got diminished chord on the diminished chord tone on the beat, right? So you could start it, if you want to start on the beat, we'll start on the chord tone. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can do the same thing on the A minor 6th, right? So I think that's where it comes from, really. And there's different variations you can run with the passing tones. Like you'll hear, like Charlie Christian, for instance, running. And all I'm doing really is just joining up the dots, which is a classic Charlie Christian technique. You've got the shape, the diminished seventh. All you're doing is going. Joining up the dots for chromatics. Lots of fun. You can do wraparounds, so you can go with a whole step above and a half step below, this kind of thing, which is kind of diminished scale. So I actually really like the sound of the whole half scale here, the diminished scale, but I'm also aware that it's relating to the chord tones of the diminished chord, which is not quite necessarily how modern players use it. There's more things you can do by turning this into various forms of dominant. Because if you lower each note of the diminished chord, sorry, I'm not making very good sense. If you lower each note of the diminished seventh chord by a half step, you get a dominant chord. So for example, if I do this, okay, which is, so instead of, which is of course F7, so I mean you could try playing around with those ideas. Here we go, so F sharp 7 from G. I think that sounds nice. So basically, you know, you've got a chromatic movement down by a half step, haven't you? So another 1, if we do the next one up, which is, and this one A7, right? This leads to something I like to do, which is this. So I like to play the A7 scale. So if I'm going, and now I go, so what I'm doing there, which might not be immediately obvious, is I'm taking the A7 scale, which is what you might call an A mixolydian mode, or an A major scale with the 7th lowered by a half step. And just like you can get from an A7 to an A sharp or a B flat, it's diminished 7th by just raising the bottom note, or the root, should I say, by a half step. You can do the same thing for a scale. And then we go back to this A7. You know, so what I'm doing now, which might not be obvious, I'm going, I'm kind of, instead of going down the scale to A, I'm kind of going down the scale to the A sharp, raised up by a half step, right? So I'm starting with a normal A7 scale. There might not be enough time to do that particular lick in this tune. So I just want to give you an idea of how that sounds. I'm just going to, so I've got the backing track here, I might as well use it. Let me see. F sharp 7. Again. Okay, A7. Let's do C7 for the next one, okay? It's another diminished one. So if I take the diminished thing again, C7, right? And as this relates to the video about the FF sharp diminished thing. I just don't like that one as much as A7. And the last one which we can use is the nuages chord, which is the flat 6/7. Very, very common in early jazz, by the way, 20s, 30s stuff. And this sound should work over the B flat diminished 7th. Let's have a give a go. Sorry, try again. So I mean, there's 3 possibilities for you. I mean, 4 really. So you can play F sharp 7, you can play A7, you can play C7, although I don't particularly like it personally, and you can play a E flat 7, and they sound great. So hopefully that has the result of making this progression a little bit more knowable. I just wanted very quickly to talk about the one in China Boy, which is a very commonly played gypsy jazz tune. I might try and get up a backing track for China Boy here, just so you can hear it. Because this is an example of something which I think you have to really bring out the diminished sound. It's kind of part of the song. So, no, I can't open that at the moment. What I'll do is I'll record this on my phone, and you'll be able to hear it. Here we go. So, this is the last 8. I'm just going to loop the last 8 of China Boy. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Typical kind of tempo, right? Okay, so you got that there. I'm just going to play over that with some of my options.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So none of those really work to me. I mean, this is probably my favourite, the flat 6. Let's just try it with a, let's do it again with the 2, which is the G7.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Let's try that again. And a flat 6. I find that if I put the flat 6 there, it sounds like a different song. Like, I'm thinking of like Sam or something, almost. So what I would suggest doing there is either, I mean, I thought the 2/7 sounded good, but if you really want to sound like the song, you have to play the diminished, right?
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, not so good at the diminished scale. There's no rule saying that you have to play those things in eighth notes, so an eighth note triplet sounds really nice. Anyway, I'm aware that this video probably has gone on a bit longer than 10 minutes, but that gives you a lot of options. I just want to recap over them so you can hear them. The first option is to ignore the chord. The second option is obviously to play the arpeggios and pay special attention to the way these join up with the other chords in the progression. Which, by the way, I'd use as a general rule for any arpeggio playing that you do. Okay, the next thing is the half-whole scale, which can be understood as... the half-whole scale in that context can be understood as being half steps below the chord tones, very much like a standard kind of gypsy jazz ways of embellishing a given arpeggio or set of chord tones. And finally, we have these interesting substitutes for the dominant. So you can take diminished seventh and you can turn each diminished seventh into 4 separate dominants, and in this case with the flat 3 diminished seventh chord, the dominants you get are the one on the leading tone, the 7th, which is the half step below the root or the tonic of the key. Okay, the next one will be the 2/7, so in the key of G that would be F sharp 7 for the first one, and then for the next one it would be A7, right? And then you've got the C7, which is the 4, which I don't like. The 4/7, not into that in this context, and the flat 6/7, which in this case is E flat 7, right? So there's your 4 different dominant sevenths, which you can get from that diminished seventh. And I would say what you can do with all of those is you can take the dominant seventh scale. Let's try it with the F7 actually, and then it'd be F7. Yeah, that works quite nicely. So I mean, it's like you can take that dominant seventh scale and you can raise up the 1, the root of the scale, by a half step, and you'll get a diminished scale. It won't be the whole half diminished scale, but it will be a mode of the harmonic minor. In fact, that will sound really pretty. So, which is a general thing that I do with scales, and a lot of this stuff, by the way, I've kind of learnt or been influenced by Barry Harris's teachings, which as always, I'd encourage anybody to check out if you're interested in getting into all of this stuff. Anyway, I'll leave it at that because I've got to race off anyway, but I hope you find that useful and interesting. Thanks for watching. Bye.